thing, in its own way. Either way, there's an awful lot riding on what happens out there.
In Quebec, too, people are on the street. In the tough 1980s, even governments seen as socially progressive take harsh steps. René Lévesque rolls back wages for more than 1 million public sector workers. Across the country, people react angrily to restraint. In Vancouver, DOA quickly releases a single urging British Columbians to act. Proceeds go to Solidarity. But protest and strike action fail to stop Bill Bennett's juggernaut. When some labor leaders make a deal with government, they are accused of caving in. Few of Solidarity's demands are met. The day the deal is announced, Renata Shearer stays outside in a friend's car and weeps. Pierre Trudeau is the first Canadian Prime Minister to have an official photographer. It's a dream job for 31-year-old Robert Cooper.
I was still looking at myself as this little kid from Niagara Falls, and here I am hobnobbing around the world.
In the 4.5 years he will shadow the Prime Minister, Robert Cooper will take more than 160,000 photographs.
I got to know him visually so well that I could tell what kind of sleep he had that night.
In the darkroom, Robert Cooper sees images of confidence. In the summer of 1981, Pierre Trudeau is at the height of his political power. Incredibly, just a year earlier, it seemed his political career was over. Conservative leader Joe Clark was elected with a minority government, but after just 9 months, Trudeau made a triumphant comeback.
Well, welcome to the 1980s.
He followed with victory in the Quebec referendum.
He was a man that knew what he wanted and would go after it. He would just relentlessly stay on something.
In the summer of 1981, Trudeau turns his focus toward a long-held goal, bringing home the Canadian Constitution.
We will try once more to get unanimous consent of the provinces to bring it home. But failing that, we'll appeal to the people of Canada to make a decision, and we will bring it home with their support.
Trudeau is determined to bring home a revised constitution so Canadians no longer need Great Britain's approval to change it. And he wants to give Canadians their own Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Only Richard Hatfield of New Brunswick and Bill Davis of Ontario support Trudeau. The other premiers form an alliance against him, soon known as the Gang of Eight. The gang is united by one goal: forcing Trudeau to negotiate. They fear a loss of provincial power.
Faced with a common front of 8 provinces out of 10, Trudeau didn't stand a chance, as long as everyone stuck to his guns and respected his signature.
The Gang of Eight mounts a fierce challenge, fighting Trudeau all the way to the Supreme Court. The Prime Minister is compelled to negotiate one more time in a dramatic game of high-stakes politics. On the morning of November 2nd, 1981, Robert Cooper prepares for the last chance meeting in Ottawa. Most of the premiers oppose Trudeau's Charter of Rights. They fear it will transfer power from elected politicians to unelected judges. René Lévesque's major demand is financial compensation for provinces opting out of federal programs. It's a way to get control in more and more areas. Robert Cooper is the only photographer allowed behind closed doors as the talks unfold. For 2 days, the Gang of Eight works hard to hold together. On the third day, with no deal in sight, Trudeau pitches one last proposal.
Why don't we get patriation first? Nobody can object to that. Then give ourselves 2 years to solve our problems over the amending formula and that charter, and failing that, consult the people in a referendum.
Lévesque feels the challenge is directed at him.
In an insinuating and provocative tone, Trudeau pushed me to the wall. "You, the great Democrat," he said, "don't tell me you're afraid to fight." At the time, he seemed really sincere. "All right," I said.
The other premiers are horrified. The last thing they want is a referendum because they know Trudeau has Canadians on his side. The unity of the gang is collapsing.
So we have a new alliance between the Quebec government and the Canadian government. And the cat is among the pigeons.
Trudeau goes home that night. The Quebec delegation returns to its hotel across the river in Hull. Most of the other premiers head across the street to the Chateau Laurier Hotel. That night, in the hotel's rooms and hallways, there are anxious gatherings. Jean Chrétien, Ontario's Roy McMurtry, and Saskatchewan's Roy Romano work desperately for a compromise. They discuss diluting Trudeau's Charter of Rights, allowing provinces to override some sections of the Charter. Trudeau has already rejected this watering down. But during the night, Chrétien, Romano, and McMurtry lock in the final agreement. It includes the override Trudeau hates. Bill Davis convinces a reluctant Trudeau he has to take it if he wants a deal. The late-night bargaining includes another change, dropping Lévesque's prized compensation from the opting-out clause. Lévesque, across the river in Hull, is not informed. The Gang of Eight meets regularly for breakfast. When Lévesque arrives late the next morning, there is a document by his plate. It's the deal the others have agreed to.
We had been betrayed, in secret, by men who hadn't hesitated to tear up their own signatures, and without their even taking the trouble to warn us.
Robert Cooper captures the celebration. -1.
When the actual signing came down, Lévesque just got up, didn't say anything, got up from his chair, spun around, and walked out.
Cooper hurries after Lévesque. He snaps one photograph.
In my mind, what this picture has done is captured a whole province's feeling in one picture.
Oui, j'en ai une, mais très brève. In spite of the joyous outpourings of most of my colleagues while they were giving their reactions to that, maybe second thoughts and further events will make them understand that this could have incalculable consequences.
The other delegations will say they acted in good faith that night to reach a deal. But in Quebec, it will become known as the Night of the Long Knives. On April 17, 1982, Robert Cooper captures a moment in Canadian history. In a very few years, the Charter of Rights will transform Canadian society. Pierre Trudeau makes his mark on history. But on the day the new Constitution is signed, there is a powerful symbol of struggle still to come. René Lévesque orders the Quebec flag to be flown at half-staff.
When I was little, I dreamed of doing things with action. I wanted to be a fireman. You can save lives. Much later, I wanted to be an astronaut when I saw them go to the moon. I was always interested in science. I wanted to explain things, to understand how and why they worked.
Growing up in a small Quebec town in the 60s, Sylvie Gagnon's dreams were not encouraged. In school, she would be steered toward the arts, not the science subjects she loved. But in the 70s and 80s, changes are beginning to happen for women like Sylvie. Changes that will bring both hard-won victories and unimaginable sorrow. Mary Eberts is coming of age during these times. She's a young professor in Toronto forging new ground in women's law. In 1973, Eberts hears of a divorce case that will outrage women across the country. An Alberta farm wife named Irene Murdoch is claiming half the family cattle ranch in her divorce. For 25 years, alongside her husband, she worked their 480 acres in the Turner Valley.
I would do the haying, stacking, sweeping, run to town for repairs and gas and oil. I just thought when you went into a marriage, it was a partnership basis, 50-50.
But the Supreme Court rules that it is her husband's farm. For a lifetime of work, Irene Murdoch is given just $200 a month. Mary Eberts blames an out-of-date legal system. She is convinced that only new laws will protect the rights of women like Irene Murdoch. She will soon have a chance to act on this belief. Across the country, other women are demanding change. In Woodstock, Ontario, Lee Lakeman opens one of the first battered women's shelters. Soon there are shelters in cities and towns across the country. Sandra Lovelace marches to Ottawa with women and children from the Tabique Reserve in New Brunswick. They're demanding equal treatment under the Indian Act. Not the church and not the state. Women must control their fate. Not the church. Carolyn Egan demonstrates in Toronto for unrestricted access to abortion. Diana Yaros from Montreal is on her first annual Take Back the Night march to confront violence against women. Sylvie Gagnon is now a young woman. She's been influenced by feminist ideas and is moving closer to her dream of a career in science. She takes a class in mechanical drafting.
Women were beginning to break into these careers. It wasn't necessarily encouraged, but it wasn't bluntly discouraged either. We were maybe seen as a bit of a curiosity, nothing more than that.
Mary Eberts is buried in her law books, searching for ways to give women the protection they want. In 1980, as Pierre Trudeau unveils his new Charter of Rights, she doesn't like what she sees. Mary Eberts wants full equality for women guaranteed in the Charter. So do many other women, but the government resists their participation in the process.
If governments do not see our place and our voice in their assemblies, it is up to women to bring the point home.
More than 1,000 determined women converge in Ottawa, quickly organizing their own conference, demanding equality be written into the Charter, forcing the government to pay attention.
The next time a cabinet minister of the government tries to tell women to go home and shut up, they'll think twice about it.
The women are victorious. Equality is enshrined in the Charter of Rights. The Charter soon becomes an instrument for change. In 1985, Native women who'd been denied equal rights under the Indian Act win full status under the Charter. And in 1988, the Charter is key in a high-profile case which throws out Canada's law against abortion. In this decade of tumultuous change, more and more women are moving into areas once considered the domain of men.
I, Bertha Wilson,
do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear.
In 1989, Sylvie Gagnon is one of a growing number of women who have decided to become engineers.
The world was opening up before me. I was convinced that the world was mine.
On Sylvie's last day of classes at Montreal's École Polytechnique, a 25-year-old man enters the school carrying a rifle. He believes feminists have ruined his life. On a deadly rampage through the school, he kills 14 women and himself. A bullet grazes Sylvie Gagnon.
I felt I was living in pure horror. It was too incredible. It was too unfair. It was too sick.
The shock and sorrow are intense across the country. But the worst mass shooting in Canada engenders a bitter debate.
I'm especially trying to understand the violence inside the men. Why the men particularly?
No, but the men killed was poor, was very sick, you know.
Yes, but the thing is that, is it the reflect of a society, of the men in the society, or is it an isolated act?
It's an isolated act. It's not the phenomenon of society. It's impossible. We'll be in the war.
I keep seeing those girls, and I feel that what this man did, he was a maniac, but it's just a magnification of what is happening to women all the time.
In the aftermath of the tragedy, groups form to raise awareness about violence against women. A campaign led by a Polytechnique student will lead to Canada's toughest gun control laws. And Canada will have a day of remembrance each December 6th. A year after the massacre, more women than ever enroll in engineering. Sylvie Gagnon, now a graduate of École Polytechnique, gets a job in the telecommunications division at Hydro-Quebec, the department's first female engineer. For generations, Canada has opened its doors to immigrants. White immigrants.
That I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen.
The country's discriminatory laws change in the 1960s and 70s, and that changes the look of Canada. At Toronto's Inglis factory, there are new faces on the assembly lines.
Up to that point, it was primarily Scottish, Irish, you know? That's what Toronto plants looked like then.
Now, Mike Hirsch's union communiques are translated into 9 languages. Pauline Flemings from Jamaica gets a job on the dryer line. She makes friends at the plant, but finds that not everyone in her new city is welcoming.
I would call up and ask if the apartment was vacant, and at first they would say yes, but by the end of the conversation, suddenly the apartment wouldn't be available. And if you called an hour later or the following day, they would tell you it was still vacant.
In 1983, 16-year-old Baltej Singh Dhillon arrives in Vancouver. He quickly learns the rules of high school.
I think I may have taken all of 5 minutes before realizing that how am I going to get rid of my brown skin? How am I going to get rid of my brown eyes? It was a moment of survival. Survival for my soul, for my spirit, for who I was.
Baltej Dhillon's lesson in survival is preparation for what lies ahead. His career plan will challenge the limits of Canada's acceptance. Dhillon wants to become a Canadian police officer in the country's elite force.
There is pride in the newly won right to wear the scarlet tunic of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police symbolize Canada to the world, a fitting image for a country that values peace, order, and good government. For many people, the uniform is one tangible symbol of an elusive Canadian identity. The broad-brimmed hat is a mandatory part of the uniform. But Baltej Dhillon has a proud symbol of his own, the turban he wears every day.
Is somebody really asking me to protect a tradition? Or are they asking me to sacrifice my religion, my principles, my disciplines, my respect in my community, the respect that I have from my family?
The RCMP dress code is under review. Dhillon may train wearing his turban, but there is no guarantee he'll be allowed to wear it as a Mountie. As politicians deliberate, Canadians speak out.
What they have to do is adapt to our customs. We don't have much left of our tradition. Adapt to us.
You join the RCMP, you wear their hat.
As Dhillon trains, he gets hate mail and threats. But there is also support for a more diverse RCMP.
I think if somebody wants to wear something that's important to them, to their nationality or their beliefs, and it doesn't interfere with what they do, let them.
I'm happy with that. If they want to wear them, carry on.
How do you feel about the traditional image of the Mountie, with the hats and that sort of thing?
It's a nice thing for the history book.
A decision has now been taken. I believe that the decision is not only correct in law, but that it is also the right decision to make.
In 1990, it is Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms that prevails. Baltej Singh Dhillon may wear his turban.
What is it to be a Canadian? I think ultimately becomes, what is it to be a citizen of this earth? And Canada is, I believe, a petri dish for this world, where we have put all the organisms of this world, all the people of this world, and we're growing and coming together and living in harmony. And we are a test sample. And how we do as a country is going to be judged globally.
In 1980, the country is captivated by a stubborn young man who begins a journey that will take him into Canadian mythology. Terry Fox is only 22 and determined to raise funds to fight the cancer that took his leg. He will not live to complete his journey, but Terry Fox will become a symbol of hope. In the year of Terry Fox's run, the country has grown to 25 million. It is the year that O Canada is officially declared the national anthem. It is the time Canadians see the beginning of a technological revolution that will usher in a new world. A new world that enters the lives of many Canadians not as a revolution, but as a toy. "12-year-old James Schmaltz longs for something almost nobody in Canada owns in 1980. A personal computer. He saves up his newspaper route money and convinces his parents to buy one of the first home computers on the market.
They saw it as something complex to learn from. An educational